We've reached that time of the year where a game here or a game there could make your team one of the most beloved in the history of the franchise or completely forgotten by October 1st.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. If I wasn't, how can I have that lower third where I declare that my name is Sully? I am an Emmy on television producer, easy for you to say, who has been a baseball podcaster for well over a decade, and this is now wrapping up my fifth full season. Is that true? My fifth full season here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Follow us on Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever it's called now, and Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're trying to get to 1 billion followers by the end of the week. And download the Gametime app and create an account and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And I'm guaranteeing you a fantastic show, because if you're watching me on the YouTubes, and I know I am, you will know that right there where I'm pointing to, I am not alone. It is friend of the podcast. Well, why don't you introduce yourself?
What's up, Sully? This is Jeff Carr, host of Locked On Reds and your Locked On MLB channel manager. And I am not as happy as I was 3 days ago.
You weren't as happy as you were a couple hours ago in the middle of the Reds game there. We're going to be talking about a bunch of things in today's show, not the least of which is the fact that the wild card race in the National League, the American League West race, nothing makes sense. And if you look away, you can go like, oh, look at that. That team is in first place alone and going to get a bye. Oh, wait a minute. No, they're your time to be a fan of a baseball team, knowing that the fortunes go up and down. But before we get into that, let's honor those who answered the trivia question correctly. And we have Court Stell answered it correctly today. The trivia question was, Doyle Alexander was very famously traded for Hall of Famer John Smoltz at the end of his career, at the end of Doyle Alexander's career. At first, it was a steal for the Detroit Tigers, as Alexander's acquisition all but clinched the American League East for the Tigers on the final day of the season. But in the end, John Smoltz, being a native from Michigan and eventually a Hall of Famer, well, in the long term, Atlanta did pretty well. However, Doyle Alexander, earlier in his career, when he was a young pitcher, was traded for another Hall of Famer. That's right. Twice in Doyle Alexander's career, he was traded for a Hall of Famer. We remember John Smoltz. Court Stell got it right. Jeff Carr, do you know the other Hall of Famer who he was traded for?
Would that be Nolan Ryan?
It would not be Nolan Ryan. The correct answer is Frank Robinson. When Doyle Alexander was a pitcher for the LA Dodgers, bet you forgot he was there. Remember that if you're doing your immaculate grid. Doyle Alexander was traded to Baltimore right after the 1971 World Series. Bet you forgot Frank Robinson was a Dodger for a year. And Frank Robinson is part of an exclusive group, which I wrote up one point. I can't remember all off the top of my head, but someone who won a postseason MVP and later joined the team that he was the postseason MVP against. He was a World Series MVP in 1966 against the LA Dodgers, and then later became a Dodger, which must have been awkward. I know that's happened a couple of times.
You got some experience in Cincinnati with trading Frank Robinson.
I know. And you know what? Milt Pappas was actually a very good pitcher for both Baltimore and later the Braves and the Cubs. Just not so much for the Reds.
For Cincinnati.
I actually, at one point on the old Sully Baseball blog, wrote a defense of the Frank Robinson trade. Obviously, in retrospect, it was such a disastrous trade that Susan Sarandon's character Annie in Bull Durham referenced it when saying, "Hey, it's a bad trade, but bad trades are part of baseball. Who can forget Frank Robinson for Mil Pappas, for goodness sake?" However, at the time, Frank Robinson was 30. Mil Pappas was a very good pitcher. Bolshin was the other pitcher, and there was someone else who I can't remember off the top of my head. And the Reds had Rose, Tony Perez, Veda Pinson. They had a lot of hitters, and they didn't have a lot of pitchers. And a couple of years in a row, they finished second or third, only a few games out. So their mentality was, we've got the bats. We need some arms. They traded the wrong bat.
And it's ironic, too, because if you think about it, it obviously didn't hurt them very much. I mean, in the short term, those next few years, it took a minute, and you kind of wish that he was in the lineup, but they figured things out a few years later.
Yeah, I was about to say, the Reds of the 70s did okay. But it was odd that the first Reds World Series trip, they lost to Frank Robinson and the Baltimore Orioles. But imagine the big red machine with Frank Robinson. Man, they could have won a few games, but they did win a few games, and some other teams are winning some games. I just want to bring this up. You're the host of Locked On Reds, and we're going to talk about the Reds and the insanity that is the National League wildcard right now. But I want to bring up the fact that at one point, I'm at my job at the school that I teach at, and my teacher aide, two of my teacher aides, and one of my students are all big baseball fans. And I pointed out at one point that the Houston Astros, who right now would be in first place and get a bye for the wild card series and be the defending World Series champion going into the postseason. At one point, they were on the verge of falling out of the playoffs altogether. That they were losing to Baltimore, as most teams do these days. Meanwhile, the Red Sox decided not to show up after the second inning in the game in Texas, and the Mariners did what everyone does, which is beat the Oakland A's. Those two teams were half a game behind Houston. They both won, and the Astros were losing in the eighth inning. And if that had happened, they would have both gone past the Astros. And because of the Blue Jays waking up and realizing these games count, that would have put the Astros on the outside looking in with 8 or 9 games left to play.
It's the only thing more crazy. Yeah. Only thing more crazy than the NL wild card race is the AL West.
Because you go from you might be the favorite to win the pennant, or you may be playing golf. That's the swing we have, especially with Toronto waking up. Now, as it happened, Houston rallied and it got a walk-off victory against their brethren in orange uniforms, the Baltimore Orioles. But we're still going in tomorrow with half a game separating 3 teams, and with Toronto winning very convincingly today against the Yankees, despite a very good performance from Michael King. The Yankees bullpen was horrible today, just walking I think they've walked 4 batters since the beginning of this podcast, and the game's been over for an hour. So the fact of the matter is the Blue Jays waking up, and good Lord, would they be dangerous in the postseason if you start with Kevin Gausman, Chris Bassett, Kikuchi, Ryu, all these pitchers on that team, and the hitters are starting to wake up. You have the Astros, the Mariners, the Rangers, and Toronto. Those are 4 teams. One of them is going to be a division winner. The Rays are going to be one of the wild card teams. I mean, we're running out of spots to put all of them in.
It's a good thing that nobody in the Central really wants to do anything, and they just let the Twins take everything in the American League Central because, there's like very few spots, but the good news is there's not as many suitors as there is in the National League side.
Well, that's true, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But the fact of the matter is, if we're taking a look at the way everything unfolds as we're going into Thursday, we're going to have, by the way, we're going to have a bunch of day baseball going on Thursday. Keep your eye open, because it really can go from you have complete and total control of your destiny or your tee time. And quite frankly, that's just going to make the rest of this season, delicious. All right. We are going to hear a little bit from our friends at Gametime. Now look it. I just used Game Time recently to get some tickets for a ball game. I went up in the Bay Area. Turns out A's games, not that hard to get. But I'm back here in Los Angeles County, and guess what I'm going to be trying to do in just a couple of weeks? I want to go to Chavez Ravine, and I want to go there. I want to see the Dodgers in the postseason. Am I a Dodger fan? No, I'm clearly a Washington Senators fan, but I want to be able to see postseason baseball. And do you know what? It's usually kind of stressful watching postseason baseball. Watching it should be. Buying the tickets should not be. That's why you got to use Game Time. Game Time's the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, theater near you. And they got killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee. You can stop stressing over tickets and get hyped over the game. Game Time is the fastest and easiest way to do it. You get flash deals. Boom, tickets, Sully, boom, pow. And I use my phone. Tap, tap, tap. Got it. And it's an easy way to find tickets for any kind of event you want to go to. And you get the seat views. Let's take a look. Hey, I dig it. I like where I'm set. Not my favorite view. Lowest price guarantee, event cancellation, which tends to happen when the Dodgers in the postseason. Oh, we were supposed to be playing this, but we got eliminated. Protection, job loss protection, all of the above. Okay? You get your flash deals on your tickets, and the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets, and listen to me good, if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. I'm getting so excited, I can't even read the copy. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDON MLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms that apply. Again, create an account. Redeem code LOCKEDON MLB, $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price. Do you know what? It's guaranteed. All right, now Jeff Carr from Locked On Reds is with me, and I'm sure he wants to use his Game Time app to watch the Reds in the postseason. All right, the AL West is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. The NL wild card is so confusing. I do my summer score where I keep track of who's in a postseason position every day, and it is every day. It's like watching the shell games, watching 3-card Monte. You know, I can't keep track, and I have to usually wait till the end of the day for the dust to settle to be like, okay, which one's a playoff team now? And this afternoon, the Cincinnati Reds and Mr. Greene, Greene for the Reds, pitched exactly the kind of game you want down the stretch. Exactly. He pitched like an ace. And the Reds rewarded him by, he struck out 14 batters, walked 1 in 7 innings. He let up a solo home run that was practically all the offense that Minnesota got. And so naturally the Reds lost the game in a absolutely brutal 9th inning. Polanco got the big hit. You're the Reds fan. Talk me through this, because you can't ask for a better I don't care what pitcher's on the mound. You can't ask for a better performance than what Greene gave you today.
Not at all. And that was something that we wondered a little bit about, because, this is now his 4th start after coming back from the injured list, where he had a hip contusion that turned into something else with his hip, and had to figure all of that out and how to recover and all this other stuff. And so his first couple of starts were struggles. And so you're thinking, down the stretch, this team already has really 3 starting pitchers. Connor Phillips just pitched very well on Monday, but that was not expected. So maybe they have 4 starting pitchers. Everybody else is hurt or ineffective. And so they've had to use a bunch of bullpen days that have been, either shutouts or they give up 12 runs. So Hunter Greene has to be that guy. And he was. 14 strikeouts is the most by a Reds starting pitcher since Ron Vallone in 2000 at St. Louis. He actually had 16 strikeouts. So
that should have been my trivia question.
Yeah, there you go. I just gave away the answer. But that you have to go a long way to find a performance that was that dominant. And for me, and this didn't factor into the decision of the game, but I thought he could have come back out at least for a little bit for the 8th.
Thank you.
He'd only throw 96 pitches. And he's fresh. It's not some of these other guys is like, oh man, they pitch late into the year. They've never pitched this much. Hunter Greene has, and Hunter Greene is fresh because he was on the injured list. I think that you save the bullpen a little bit more. But then you even add on to that, when you get into the bullpen, the Reds had their A squad available. They had Alexis Diaz, who hadn't pitched in a couple of days. They had Lucas Sims, who didn't pitch in this game, but he hadn't pitched in a couple of days. Ian Jabot, who leads the team in appearances, but he hadn't pitched in a couple of days. Everybody's ready to go. And that group, the A squad, is what blows the game. That's what throws me. And then there's defensive miscues and things like that there in the ninth inning, but Alexis Diaz has been good enough to pitch around those this year. Instead, he gets his third blown save, and now everyone, and look, this is the time of year that when you do lose a game, the first person in the comment section is saying, I told you, they're done, we're doing no more playoffs now. They're still in it because of how crazy this whole wild card picture is.
But I'm glad you brought, because look, I wasn't sitting down watching the game because the man's got a job, but I was checking on it, and I thought, oh, they're going to send him out for the 8th. At least send him out for the 8th, because we're at that time of year. I had a different complaint for the Blake Snell no-hitter the other day, because why not let him pitch the 8th? I mean, it's Padres Rockies. What are you saving his arm for at this point? I mean, it's like, why not? See what you got, But this was different. It was like, hey, let's give the bullpen a day off. Let's have that high of, we hand the ball. He pitched like ace. Now, if he gets in trouble in the 8th inning, I totally understand taking him out.
Right.
But you get a chance to win that kind of a game, and you sit it out. I'm sorry. There's no way I don't let him at least come out there.
They were talking about it in the middle of the game. The broadcast crew, they said that in the middle of, or the bottom of the 7th inning, whenever the Reds were hitting, they said there were multiple, not just one, there were multiple discussions between Hunter Greene and manager David Bell. And they thought that meant Hunter Greene was going to stay in this ballgame, because they said that his body language was that of somebody that was not coming out. Like, they hadn't ran the tail of the tape or anything like that. They hadn't ran the box score for his start at that point. And so you're thinking, okay, he's coming out for the 8th. And then that just doesn't happen. And the biggest problem, Sully, with this loss is that it comes a day after it felt like they punted a game. On Tuesday, they pitched a bullpen day, and the way that they pitched everybody but the A squad, like I mentioned. They threw Ben Lively out there for 4 innings. After the 2nd inning, it was very apparent he didn't have it. And then, you give some credit to Willie Castro for making some amazing plays for the Twins in center field. But the way that the Reds strategized that game, it just felt like they punted it. And in the 7th inning, and this is what let me know, and it's why I'm wearing my shirt, this is possibly the last homestand for Joey Votto as the Cincinnati Reds player. And I hate saying that, but I think that's where we're going with this. Mm-hmm. He was pinch hit for in the 7th inning for another left-handed hitter. It was so weird to see. I'm like, there's no matchup sense there. Why are we? And he's fine. He played today. So yeah, the whole game on Tuesday was just like, wow, you're really betting on Wednesday. So when they lost on Wednesday, that just made it even worse.
Yeah, I don't understand it. I don't understand it at all. Especially they have 8 games left.
Yeah,
they have 8 games left.
3 home games and 5 road games. Yep.
Okay, so we're going to talk about 8 games when we come back, and the fact that in these 8 games, the teams that are running for the wild card may do the absolute unthinkable and give hope for a team that is, quite frankly, dead from the neck up, but not dead in the standings. Hey, Jeff, why don't you talk to us a little bit? Whoops. What? Whoops. Why don't I hit the bumpers a few more times? And why don't you talk to us a little bit about our friends at FanDuel?
Well, Sully, right now with football season getting started, FanDuel's the place to go because they've got a great offer for everybody. If you go and you create an account today and you place a $5 wager, you're going to get $200 in free wagers back, whether you win or lose. You got to check them out today. FanDuel is so easy when you're talking about NFL, when you're talking about baseball playoffs. They've got all kinds of great props. One of my favorite things is if I'm getting a feeling on a player. I was at the ballpark on Tuesday, unfortunately, for that bad loss for the Reds. But beforehand, an usher was telling me about how Ellie De La Cruz was hitting the ball to the smokestacks there in center field. A couple of different balls in batting practice. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go to FanDuel. I'm going to put a prop on Ellie to hit a homer. He didn't, but you can do all kinds of fun stuff like that on FanDuel. Check him out today. And there's a great line as well when you're talking about who's going to hit the first home run, because typically those odds are pretty crazy. And if you pick the right guy, you're going to win big. Check them out today. Again, FanDuel.com/lockedon. To get started, you bet $5, you'll get $200 back in free bets, win or lose, as we move throughout the playoffs with baseball, and we've got college football, NFL, NBA's coming soon, NHL. It's that time of year. We are getting into one of the best sports months of the year, and the best way to take advantage of that is with FanDuel.
And now the bumper doesn't work. Oh, jeez.
Technology.
There you go. Hey, San Diego Padres have been out of it for a little bit. They've been phoning it in. And boy, with this log jam, they must be just kicking themselves. If they only were decent the first half of the season, they would be right in the middle of it, and like the Blue Jays, be super dangerous. But I took a look because the Giants have been falling like a rock, and they lost again today to the Diamondbacks. Shout out to Miller Thomas, who is thrilled that the Diamondbacks are making a run for it. The Cubbies, despite getting a grand slam today, got smacked around by the Pirates, no less. The Marlins have dropped 2 games to the Mets. In one of the games, the Mets did everything but hand deliver a game to the Marlins at one point. Right. And, the Reds are, they've dropped their last couple of games. The Padres have won their last 7, including the near no-hitter the other day. And look, there's only 8 games left, and they're 4.5 out, okay? That being said, the rest of the teams are playing so badly that they haven't eliminated them yet. I mean, I know it's a long shot, but they're still technically alive. Gordon's alive.
And there's a hilarious thing as well, like keeping hope alive for the Cubs, because the Cubs have played so well to a point that some people were thinking, could they catch the Brewers? And the Brewers haven't played all that great here recently either. No. But then the Cubs decided to lose 5 in a row, and now they're floundering there in the final wild card spot. The Diamondbacks are starting to take a foothold. It feels like, and we keep talking, wild card race. Makes me think of that Sunny episode whenever Charlie Day plays the wild card on one of their schemes, and they're like, wait, who cut the brakes? And Charlie Day's like, wild card, baby! And then he kicks the back door open and jumps out the van. That's what this feels like, because as soon as you think someone is dead in this wild card race, they come back. The Giants aren't out of this thing yet, although they really need to win at least one game against the Diamondbacks to really feel good about their chances.
Well, yeah, and it's funny. I was up north last weekend, and my mother, who's a big baseball fan, is listening to this right now. I was talking about how the Giants lost this game, and the Marlins lost that game, and this, and the Diamondbacks lost that game. And I turned to my mom and said, like, I don't think anybody won yesterday. I think all 30 teams just lost, because it just. Yeah. Like everyone's on a losing streak right now. It just seems that way sometimes.
It was just a day where they're like, the bottom half of the league that's not playing for the playoffs, we'll give them a win and we'll take this day off. We'll let them have that one.
And here's the deal for me, at least, is that there you could be cynical and say, okay, this is all going to be, posturing for a position to get your butts handed to you by Atlanta or Los Angeles. But remember last year, there were 3 teams that won 100 games in the National League, and none of them played in the league championship series.
Right. It was the final wild card team, the Phillies, who had just barely made it in, and it felt like
1 game over the Brewers.
Backed in. Yeah, they it almost felt like they backed into the playoffs and then they were in the World Series. You just got to make it to the dance.
Now, to be fair, I think this Atlanta team is better than any of the teams that were last year. I mean, this Atlanta team is
top to bottom.
But
there's no
the
hope.
Dodgers are putting it together.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't count out Milwaukee with their pitching staff. Burns, Woodruff, Peralta in a short series. In a best of 5 series, they could be up 2-1 before you could say Cecil Cooper. And I would be nervous about them. I still think, and I talked about this the other day, I think it's going to be either Atlanta, Baltimore, or Atlanta, Houston. But as I pointed out earlier, Houston could potentially miss the playoffs altogether. And if they do, we're going to go into the postseason with no consensus villain.
I can't remember, what was it, last year or 2 years ago, we said that coming into the postseason, we both picked Milwaukee.
I did.
And it was because of their pitching. Mm-hmm. And you're right. Like, they've got the makeup and just enough hitting. Like, their hitting is not as good as Atlanta. It's not as good as Los Angeles. It's not as good as Philadelphia. But as a Reds fan, I have seen firsthand how good they pitch, and it's just in every situation you think like, boy, oh boy, is our lineup just that bad? Well, then the very next series that the Reds played after the Brewers, they went and they scored like 7, 8, and 9 runs in each 3 games. So it's like, okay, it's not the lineup, it's just the pitching. Burns, Woodruff, and Woodruff is back healthy. Freddie Peralta, I mean, those big 3 right there, you're going to see them at the beginning of a series, and you might be down 3-0. And at that point, you're kind of in trouble. And then, of course, 5-game series, you lost.
Yeah. And, of course, I picked Milwaukee that year because of their pitching. I didn't take into account the bullpen of Atlanta, which basically won that series. And I didn't take into account the stupidity of lining up the postseason where you had a 107-win team and a 106-win team playing each other in the division series. The league championship series should have been LA versus San Francisco, but I digress. So, every day it's going to be a little something different. For both the AL West and for the wild card, especially if Toronto continues to play well. That's the wrinkle in it, that you may not have 3 teams from the West, and with only half a game separating 3, it's going to be a good final few days. Jeff Carr, where can people listen to your terrific show?
And catch Locked On Reds on your favorite podcast platform and on YouTube as well. If you're watching Locked On MLB here on YouTube, you can check out Locked On Reds on YouTube as well.
All right, and today's trivia question is Red-centric. You cannot answer it, Jeff Carr. The Reds have not won a home playoff game since Game 3 of the 1995 Division Series. In that game, a veteran utility infielder hit a pinch hit grand slam that basically iced the game. Who was that utility infielder, veteran utility infielder, who hit the grand slam that put away the game that was the final, as of this recording, home playoff victory for the Cincinnati Reds? Post your answers down here on the YouTube page, or at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter and Instagram, or on my page at Sully Baseball on Twitter, or whatever it's called now, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Talking about the Wild West, the wild card, and everything else, which I think has changed since we started the show, even though the games have ended. This has been a Locked On MLB, Locked On Reds crossover. He's Jeff Carr. I'm your pal, Sully. See you tomorrow.